Welcome to Moonlitwest, a place where gentle stories guide you into peaceful sleep. I'm so happy to join you on a new journey filled with touching tales. Have you ever wondered how many great love stories are left untold amidst the vast universe and its millions of twinkling stars? If a poor engineer and a noblewoman from two completely different worlds faced conspiracy and danger together, could their love transcend all boundaries and sacrifice to save thousands of lives? If you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to support Moonlitwest and never miss another story. Now, let's relax, close our eyes, and dive into the world of the light within eternity. At the end of the 22nd century, humanity faced its greatest turning points in history. Earth, once a lush and thriving home, had become a desolate planet. Environmental disasters, resource depletion, and endless struggles for survival had pushed humanity to the brink of despair. Yet even that darkness, a ray of hope emerged. A colossal spaceship named Eterna, hailed as the symbol of salvation, carrying 10,000 lives on a journey to a new planet, dubbed humanity's new paradise. From afar, Eterna appeared as a marvel of advanced technology. Its shimmering hull reflected the distant starlight, stretching tens of kilometers in length, with a massive rear section housing powerful engines designed to traverse interstellar distances. More than just a gigantic machine, Eterna was built as a miniature city, divided into distinct zones to serve each class on board, from the expansive, luxurious upper decks where every convenience was available, to the cramped lower quarters where impoverished workers toiled relentlessly to keep the ship operational. Every aspect of Eterna mirrored the entrenched inequality of human society. On the topmost deck, where light always shone brightly and air remained crisp and pure, the upper class indulged in their journey within grand glass-walled chambers overlooking the galaxy, artificial gardens brimming with vibrant greenery, lavish dining rooms serving dishes recreated from Earth's golden culinary days. Meanwhile, life on the lower levels was far harsher. The working class, unable to afford passenger tickets, but bound by labor contracts, lived in cramped quarters where the air reeked of oil and metal. Flickering neon lights illuminated corridors, crisscrossed with pipes and electrical wires. These individuals worked under constant stress, ensuring that the engines, power systems, and life support systems of the ship operated smoothly. For them, Eterna was not a dream, but a burden, a job they couldn't abandon because their family's survival depended on the meager wages sent back from the ship. Eterna's maiden voyage launched from a massive spaceport on Titan's surface, with millions of eyes from Earth and its solar system colonies watching through holographic screens. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new future, or perhaps the riskiest gamble humanity had ever made. Amid the crowd's deafening cheers, Eterna ascended, inching into the dark void of space, carrying hopes, ambitions, and unresolved conflicts along its journey. Though Eterna appeared flawless on the outside, it harbored dangerous fractures within. Engineers who had worked on its control systems had left vulnerabilities, some by accident, others deliberately. Members of the upper class conspired to exploit the ship to consolidate their power on the new planet, regardless of the consequences for others. To them, Eterna was not merely a vessel, but a colossal chessboard where they held all the power. Beneath the ship's grandeur lay the fears, ambitions, and fragile hopes of every individual on board, small sparks waiting to be extinguished in the boundless darkness. Was Eterna truly a vessel of salvation, or merely a glittering trap leading humanity toward another catastrophe? The answer would only be revealed as the journey neared its end. The starlight gradually faded behind as Eterna propelled itself into the vast night of space. This voyage was not merely an emigration. It was the story of individuals caught in the wheel of destiny, where every class, secret, and choice would shape the future of humanity. Aiden Nova didn't belong to the radiant lights or the echoes of laughter on Eterna's upper decks. He was born in a dusty corner of Earth, where every breath felt like a struggle. His father, a miner, worked himself to exhaustion to earn the few coins needed to keep the family afloat. Aiden lost his mother when he was young, leaving him with a deep scar that time could never heal. But Aiden was not one to be subdued. He grew up with a sharp mind and an unyielding will, always believing that talent and determination could break through any limit. When he received the notice that he had been selected as a maintenance engineer for Eterna, it wasn't just a job, it was a dream of touching the future. However, that dream was quickly overshadowed by harsh reality. The working class on the ship was not respected. They were mere shadows, nameless cogs in a massive machine. Aiden worked tirelessly day and night in cramped corridors, where flickering lights and the constant noise of engines never ceased. Yet even in the darkness, he carried a sense of pride in knowing that every pipe he inspected, every system he repaired, kept the ship moving forward on its journey. In a completely different part of Eterna, Liora Vale stood before a massive glass wall where the light of distant stars danced across her face. Her jet black hair cascaded down like a silk waterfall, shimmering with silver highlights reflected from the vast space beyond. Her skin was smooth and pale, like porcelain, soft yet exuding an air of coldness, a beauty both inviting and untouchable, as if she belonged to another world, one beyond anyone's reach. Her eyes, a stormy blue-gray like the ocean on tempestuous days, always carried an unnameable melancholy, as though searching for something lost in vain. The dress she wore was a masterpiece of fashion. She stood there, her gaze quietly sweeping over the scattered constellations in the endless night sky. Each star was like an unanswered question, a reminder that she, even as the daughter of one of the most powerful men on the planet, remained trapped in a reality that didn't feel like her own. She had once wished she could fly out there, free to soar among the stars, without being confined by the golden cage her father had built for her. But freedom, to her, seemed as distant as the shimmering light of the nebulas, beautiful but forever out of reach. When the starlight touched her high cheekbones and softly tinted lips, Liora looked like a statue carved by a master sculptor's hand. Yet behind that flawless exterior was a heart yearning to break free from the mask she was forced to wear every day. In that brief moment, as the universe seemed to pause outside the window, Liora wondered, is there anyone somewhere out there who could truly see me for who I am? Liora longed for freedom, for something more meaningful than being a trophy to showcase her family's prestige on this voyage. She knew Eterna was more than just a ship. It was a stage where grand ambitions and sinister conspiracies were at play. But she never imagined that her yearning for exploration would lead her into a meeting that would change her life forever. Liora rarely ventured beyond the upper decks, where she was surrounded by dazzling lights, artificial laughter, and empty conversations about power and wealth. But that night, as Eterna drifted through the mesmerizing beauty of the Milky Way, she felt an inexplicable urge, a desire to break the rules she had always followed. Draping herself in a dark cloak to avoid attention, Liora slipped out of her quarters and began descending into the ship's quieter, lesser-traveled corridors. The lower sections were unlike anything she had ever seen. Instead of elegance and perfection, there were dull metal walls, rusted pipes, and faint, flickering neon lights. The air carried the heavy scent of oil and machinery, but to Liora, it brought a strangely vibrant sensation, as though this place was the true heart that kept the massive ship alive. Her footsteps echoed against the metal floor, each step quickening the beat of her heart with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Liora passed through automatic doors that clattered faintly as they slid open, her eyes scanning the control panels filled with numbers and charts she couldn't comprehend. She saw workers in gray uniforms, their foreheads glistening with sweat as they focused intently on their tasks. Never before had she felt such a palpable sense of urgency and reality. Everything here was foreign yet captivating, making her feel closer to the real world she had always yearned to experience. But her curiosity soon led her into danger. As she walked through a narrow corridor leading to the technical area, she heard a loud hissing sound from an energy conduit vibrating violently. She stepped back instinctively, but before she could react further, a small explosion erupted, throwing her against the wall. Flames burst from the pipe, and thick smoke filled the air, making her cough uncontrollably. Liora panicked as she realized she was trapped in a confined space, unable to find an escape amid the debris and rising heat from the blast. She didn't scream. Liora had grown accustomed to hiding her emotions, even in the most perilous moments. But her heart pounded wildly, and for the first time, she felt the true fragility of her existence. not as the noble Vale heiress, but as a small, vulnerable human amidst the vast machinery. As she tried to steady herself, a voice called out through the smoke. "Is anyone there?" The voice was deep, calm, yet urgent, belonging to someone who seemed familiar with facing crises. Liora took a deep breath and trying to stay calm. "I'm here," she called out, her voice slightly hoarse from the smoke. Footsteps quickly approached, and through the hazy smoke, she saw a man in a gray-blue engineer's uniform. His face was smeared with grease, but his deep, dark eyes shone as they met hers. Aiden Nova hurried toward. Aiden studied her for a moment, asking no further questions. Instead, he extended his hand to help her up from where she was crouched by the broken wall. Her skin was cool to the touch, but that brief contact caused both of them to feel an inexplicable connection, as if the universe, in that fleeting moment, had arranged their meeting. "Follow me. This area isn't safe," he said quickly, leading her away from the smoke. Liora obediently followed, silently grateful for his composure and decisiveness. Yet, as her eyes scanned his face, she couldn't help but wonder, how could a man from the working class have such profound and commanding eyes, as though he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders? They left the danger zone, and as the light from the main corridor illuminated them, Liora turned to look at the man who had just saved her. "Thank you," she said, her voice more sincere than it had ever been. But Aiden merely nodded, his eyes still thoughtful and reserved. He didn't know who this woman was, but one thing was certain: their encounter would change everything, yet their worlds were never meant to align easily. Once the incident was resolved, Aiden returned to his grueling work, while Liora went back to the upper-class life, where she had to face the relentless responsibilities and pressures of her family. However, the serendipitous meetings that followed gradually drew the two closer. Aiden, whose heart had been weathered by life's hardships, began to open up to Leora's sincerity and determination, and Liora, bound by societal expectations, found in Aiden a companion she never thought she would encounter. But on Eterna, nothing was ever truly safe. Behind the bright lights lay the shadows of conspiracies. A group of elites, led by a ruthless and ambitious man, were plotting to seize control of the entire ship. Their plan wasn't just to colonize the new planet, it was to eliminate all obstacles, including human lives, to claim every resource for themselves. In this dangerous game, Aiden and Liora quickly realized they weren't just fighting to protect the ship, but also to safeguard the fragile bond between two people from two entirely different worlds. Liora stood before a grand mirror in her opulent suite, her pale hands clutching the edge of her wedding gown. The crystal chandeliers above cast light that danced off the gemstones adorning her dress, making it sparkle like stars in the vast universe. But her eyes, once as radiant as the sky, now appeared empty, reflecting a deep sorrow. This wedding wasn't for her, at least, not for her heart. It was a move in a calculated game of power, a chess piece her father, Edward Vale, had meticulously placed to solidify the Vale family's alliance with the Forlan dynasty, wealthy and equally ambitious. She had tried to resist, but her voice was drowned out by the cold reasoning. This is your duty, for the family, for our future. Those words cut into her like sharp blades each time she heard them. Liora knew she had no choice, but deep within, she longed for something else. Freedom, love, or at the very least, a reason to feel alive elsewhere on the ship. Aiden Nova bent over a control panel, his eyes scanning the flashing indicators. Rows of data flickered across the screen, signaling irregularities. He frowned, his heart sinking as he realized the gravity of the situation. These weren't random malfunctions, they were deliberate tamperings. Aiden quickly delved deeper into the system, and as the information unfolded, he felt as if he had just uncovered a horrifying secret. A group of elites, spearheaded by Victor Forlan, Leora's future fiancé, were conspiring to alter the ship's trajectory. Their plan was to direct Eterna to a dead planet, abandoning the working-class passengers to perish, while the elite escaped on pre-prepared escape vessels. This wasn't an accident. It was a purge. When Aiden reported his findings to his superiors, he was met only with cold indifference and dismissive headshakes. No one believed a lowly engineer, and no one dared to challenge the elites. Frustration and helplessness consumed him, but in the darkest of moments, he thought of Liora. She was the only one who could grant. Aiden's plan began on a quiet night, when most workers in the lower decks had retired to sleep. He crept through the narrow corridors, the flickering neon lights casting sharp shadows across his tense face. His heart pounded as he considered the risk of being caught, not just for breaching restricted zones, but also for carrying confidential data that the conspirators would undoubtedly destroy if they found him. Aiden had spent days studying Leora's schedule. He knew she often appeared in the artificial botanical garden in the late afternoons, where the light from simulated lamps created a serene atmosphere amid the ship's vast interior. It was a place where she could escape the scrutinizing eyes of the upper class, a place where she could be herself, even if only briefly. But to get there, Aiden would have to pass through at least 3 security checkpoints and avoid the cold stares of the surveillance system. Wearing his engineer uniform, Aiden tried to appear as if he was performing routine maintenance. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, and stuck close to the walls to draw as little attention as possible. The first checkpoint posed no significant issue. Lower deck workers were often required to move between sections to repair equipment, but at the second checkpoint, which led to the upper class area, he encountered a problem. "What are you doing here?" A tall security guard blocked his path, his gaze sharp and questioning. Aiden took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "I was called up to inspect the ventilation system. There's been a signal anomaly in the upper levels." He held up a handheld control panel displaying fabricated data he had meticulously prepared beforehand. The guard stared at the screen, frowning. "I haven't received any notification about this." "It's an emergency order," Aiden replied quickly, masking the anxiety in his tone. "If we don't address it immediately, the ventilation system could shut down, affecting all the passengers in the upper levels." The guard hesitated, scrutinizing him for a moment, but eventually nodded and let him through, though not without a lingering look of suspicion. When Aiden stepped into the artificial garden, he felt as though he had entered a completely different world. Rows of lush green plants stretched out before him, and the warm light from the simulated lamps created a scene reminiscent of an earthly sunset. In the middle of this tranquil setting, Liora stood beside a cluster of pale purple flowers, her fingers gently brushing the delicate petals. Her figure, clad in a simple yet elegant long dress, made her appear like a character from a painting, beautiful yet distant and untouchable. Aiden approached her slowly, his palms damp with sweat. He wasn't sure if she would remember him, the engineer who had saved her during a minor explosion in the lower decks. But before he could speak, she turned around, her stormy blue-gray eyes widening in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Liora asked, her voice not exactly cold, but tinged with curiosity. "I need to speak with you," Aiden replied, his tone soft yet firm. "This is very important. It concerns the lives of everyone on this ship." Liora frowned, her gaze briefly sweeping over his engineer uniform. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, not entirely out of suspicion, but as an instinctive defense of someone accustomed to a world filled with schemes. Aiden met her eyes directly, his dark gaze shining with an undeniable sincerity. "You don't have to trust me," he said, "but if I don't speak up, we're all going to die. I need your help." There was something in his voice that made Liora relent. She didn't know why, but she felt the urgency and genuine fear in every word he spoke. "Follow me," she said, making a split-second decision. "We can't talk here." Liora led Aiden to a small room behind the garden, a place she knew they wouldn't be disturbed. When the door closed, Aiden began recounting what he had discovered. Every word he spoke, every piece of data he presented, made Leora's complexion pale. She knew Victor Forlin, the fiancé she was being forced to marry, was ambitious, but she had never imagined he could be so ruthless as to sacrifice thousands of lives to achieve his goals. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. For the first time, she felt truly powerless. But Aiden, with steadfast eyes, responded with unwavering determination. "We stop them, no matter what it takes." Both of them understood they were up against a force far greater than themselves, but they had no other choice. Aiden wasn't just carrying the burden of being an engineer. He carried the hopes of the voiceless people on the ship. And Liora, for the first time in her life, felt as though she was truly living for something greater than herself. After the tense meeting in the artificial garden, Liora and Aiden knew they couldn't act hastily. The conspiracy aboard Eterna was too large to be thwarted in a single night, and the antagonists were too powerful to be overcome without meticulous planning. They needed time, not just to prepare, but also to build trust in each other. In the following days, Liora leveraged her position to gather more information. She quietly attended meetings with Victor Forlan, noting critical details and marking the places his group frequented. Each night, she slipped away from the lavish parties to meet Aiden in hidden corners of the ship. Together, they pieced together the conspiracy that was becoming increasingly clear: secret energy conduits, tampered control stations, and Victor's detailed plans to alter Eterna's trajectory. Meanwhile, Aiden worked tirelessly in the technical bays. He tried to reach out to colleagues he trusted, persuading them to help without revealing too much. But not everyone was willing to listen, and the isolation sometimes made him feel as though he was fighting alone. Whenever that feeling crept in, he thought of Liora, the determination in her eyes, the slight smile she gave him when they planned. She wasn't just an ally, she was a source of strength he hadn't expected. Their clandestine meetings weren't just for discussing strategies. Gradually, amid talks of conspiracies and plans, they began to share personal stories. Aiden told Liora about his impoverished life on Earth, about his mother's death when he was a child, and how he worked relentlessly to earn his place on this journey. Liora listened in silence, her eyes glistening under the dim hallway lights. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," she said one night, her voice gentle. "Others always talk about power, about money, but you just want to do the right thing." Aiden smiled, a faint but warm expression. "And you," he said, his eyes fixed on hers. "You're unlike anyone else. You don't belong in that world of luxury. You're different." In that moment, they both realized that amid danger and the divide between their worlds, they had found something rare, a connection profound and genuine. Their subsequent meetings were no longer just about planning, but about being together, even if only briefly. Liora realized that Aiden was more than just an engineer. He was someone who awakened a newfound faith in herself. And Aiden, every time he looked into her eyes, felt that every sacrifice he was about to make was worth it. Finally, after days of preparation, they decided to act on a night when most of the upper class would be preoccupied with a grand party. It was their only chance to access the control center without drawing too much attention. Before the mission began, Liora and Aiden met in a small bay near the technical area. Standing face to face, the light from the control panel reflected off their faces. "Are you sure about this?" Liora asked, her voice trembling slightly. "If this doesn't work, we don't have any other choice," Aiden replied, his eyes filled with determination. Then, as if remembering something, he stepped closer and took her hand. "Liora, I don't know if we'll survive this, but if there's one thing I'm sure of, It's that I'm grateful to have met you." Liora looked at him, tears quietly streaming down her cheeks. "So am I," she whispered. "You've shown me that I can be someone better, and I'll never forget that." They stood in silence for a moment, hearing only the rapid beats of their own hearts. Then, as though time itself had paused, Aiden leaned in, and their kiss became a final promise, a vow to fight together to their last breath. As Aiden and Liora entered Eterna's control center, they both knew there was no turning back. The lights from the control panels flickered intensely, and the alarm systems blared incessantly, a stark reminder that time was running out. Aiden looked at Liora, his gaze unwavering. "We have to do this. For everyone," he said, his voice deep and steady. Liora nodded, her trembling hands hovering over the keyboard. Every command she typed brought them closer to survival, but it also placed them directly in the sights of the antagonists. They didn't have to wait long. A loud, metallic crash echoed from the main door, and the elite's enforcers burst in, laser weapons in hand, their cold eyes gleaming like predatory animals. "You think you can stop us?" Victor Forlan, the man leading the conspirators and Leora's betrothed, sneered. He stepped forward with an air of arrogance, his gaze never leaving Liora. "You're such a fool, Liora. You really think a lowly engineer can save you?" Aiden stepped in front of Liora, his hand gripping a metal rod he'd picked up from the floor. He said nothing, but his eyes burned with fury. When Victor's men charged, Aiden fought with every ounce of strength he had, protecting Liora with every move. He knew he couldn't let her get hurt, couldn't let their plans fall apart. But the attackers outnumbered him, and Aiden was quickly overwhelmed. Liora, despite having no combat experience, joined the fray. She managed to knock one attacker down from behind with a wrench Aiden had given her, but she was soon pushed to the ground. Victor approached, grabbing her arm and pulling her to her feet. "You belong to me, Liora. Don't forget that," he growled, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "No," Liora screamed, wrenching herself free from his grasp. "I don't belong to you. You will never understand what real love is." While Liora struggled, Aiden was already exhausted, his eyes losing their usual brightness. He forced himself to his feet, sweat and blood dripping onto the floor, but he didn't stop. He looked at Victor, his voice trembling with fury. "You may have wealth, you may have power, but you'll never have what we have: trust, love, and sacrifice." Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Figures emerged through the dim light, and as they came closer, Aiden recognized Captain Carter, a friend and trusted colleague, leading a group of workers from the lower decks. They carried whatever tools they could find: wrenches, steel pipes, anything that could serve as a weapon. "Aiden, we're here," Carter shouted, his voice resonating through the room. The antagonists were caught off guard by the sheer number of workers flooding in. They fought not just for themselves, but for the future of their families, for the hope that they might survive this journey. The sounds of yelling, clashing metal, and bursts of laser light filled the confined space, creating a chaotic yet powerful scene. Aiden saw his team gaining the upper hand, but he knew it wouldn't last unless the system was restored immediately. He dashed toward the control panel, where the central engine was flickering on the verge of total collapse. Liora, realizing his intent, ran after him. "No, Aiden, you can't do this alone," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. He turned back, grasping her hand one last time. "Liora, you're the strongest person I've ever known. You've changed me, and I can't let everything end here. You have to live, for everyone." Tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't stop him. Aiden smiled, his expression tender yet resolute. "I love you, Liora. Remember that ... Aiden entered the central engine room, where dangerous radiation was leaking from the damaged components. He activated the emergency system, fully aware that the cost would be his life. As the warning lights shifted from red to green, the ship trembled violently before gradually stabilizing. The system had been restored. Outside, Liora screamed his name, but it was too late. Through the glass, she saw him smiling, his eyes closed in peace. A blinding light enveloped the room, and when it faded, only silence remained. As Eterna returned to a safe orbit, Liora stood by the control panel, tears streaming down her face. The crowd of workers gathered, bowing their heads in profound respect for the man who had sacrificed himself to save them. Carter placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice hoarse with emotion. "He was the best man I ever knew. He did what no one else dared to do." Liora turned, her tear-filled eyes now burning with determination. "Aiden didn't just save us. He gave us a reason to fight. We have to live, not just for ourselves, but for him." After Eterna regained its stable orbit, the ship fell into an eerie stillness. The corridors that once buzzed with machinery and footsteps now echoed with sighs and the soft sobs of survivors. They had overcome danger, but the price was immeasurable. Aiden Nova, the man they once dismissed as a lowly engineer, had become a symbol of courage and sacrifice. Liora stood on the ship's main deck, where everyone had gathered to hear her final words. Her eyes were red from crying, but they shone with fierce determination. Her slender shoulders now carried the weight of responsibility for thousands of lives. Before stepping up to the podium, she took a deep breath and touched the old wrench Aiden had given her during their fight. It was no longer just a tool, but a symbol of their connection and the strength he had passed on to her. "We have lost so much." Her voice began softly but grew stronger. "Those who sacrificed, the dreams that were cut short, the moments we can never get back. But we're still here, still alive, because of one man who dared to stand up for us. Aiden Nova didn't just save my life, he saved all of us." The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on her, seeking guidance. Liora continued, her hands clenched tightly to steady her voice. He showed us that class divisions, differences in status or circumstance, never determine the worth of a person. What matters most is the heart, the courage, and the relentless will to fight for what is right. A wave of emotion rippled through the crowd. Workers who had been overlooked and underestimated now stood taller, their eyes alight with pride. They knew they were no longer just cogs in a machine. They were fighters, survivors, and the builders of a new future. The journey of Eterna stretched on for several more months before the ship finally arrived at the new planet, Aurora, a lush world with towering mountain ranges, sparkling rivers, and an unblemished blue sky. When the main doors of the ship opened, the first rays of sunlight bathed the faces of the survivors. It was a moment of realization that Aiden's sacrifice had not been in vain. Liora was the first to step down, her feet touching the ground, and she felt as though she was walking on fragments of Aiden's memories. He couldn't be there, but every heartbeat of this new planet seemed to carry his breath. She looked up at the vast blue sky, a tear silently rolling down her cheek. "You're here, aren't you, Aiden?" she whispered, her lips curling into a faint smile. Under Leora's leadership, the survivors began to build a new society, but unlike Earth, where class divisions had caused so much suffering, Aurora became a place where everyone was equal. The lessons from their journey and Aiden's sacrifice were etched into every brick they laid. Years later, the story of Eterna and the love between Aiden Nova and Liora Vale became a legend passed down through generations. On winter nights on Aurora, when the starry sky shone brightly, people would gather around fires and share the tale of the brave engineer who sacrificed everything for love and humanity's hope. Liora, now an older woman, but still retaining the grace of her youth, often sat alone by the window, gazing up at the stars. In her heart, the memories of Aiden remained as vivid as the first day they met. "You've never left me, Aiden," she whispered, and in the light of the distant nebulas, she could feel his warmth, like an eternal light guiding her through every storm of life. The story didn't end on Aurora. It continued to spread among the stars, serving as a testament to love that transcends all boundaries, to sacrifice and courage, and to a future where humanity learns to love and protect one another. Aiden Nova was not just a name. He was an eternal light in the hearts of all who had ever heard his story. And that's the heartfelt story of love, sacrifice, and hope among the stars. If this tale has touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts about this story in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Now, relax your body, close your eyes, and let the gentle light of the stars guide you into a peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams, and have a beautiful night.